The long road to destiny. Boromir's fateful journey from Minas Tirith to Rivendell. The perilous path. The vast expanse of Calenardon stretched before Boromir, son of Denethor, as he trudged through the wind-swept plains. His cloak whipped about him, a constant reminder of the relentless gusts that swept across the grasslands. Each step carried the weight of Gondor's fate, a burden that seemed to grow heavier with every league of his 110-day journey to Imladris.
Seek for the sword that was broken.
The words of the cryptic dream echoed in his mind, driving him forward despite the harsh conditions. As he approached the treacherous gap of Rohan, a glint of gold caught his eye. A band of Rohirrim emerged from the swaying grass, their fair hair shimmering in the sunlight.
Hail, traveler from the White City. What brings you to these dangerous lands?
I journey north on a quest of great importance. What news can you share of the road ahead?
Dark times have fallen upon these lands. Dunlending raiders prowl the western borders, and we've seen Uruk high, scouting parties venturing ever closer to our settlements.
The Rohirrim exchanged glances, their eyes widening with a mixture of respect and concern for the lone traveler's courage.
You do well to veer northward, my lord. Skirt the foothills of the Misty Mountains.
It is a longer road, but safer than chancing an encounter with those foul beasts.
I thank you for your counsel. May your horses run swift and your spears strike true.
Heeding their advice, Boromir adjusted his course. The familiar grasslands gave way to rockier terrain as he approached the looming shadows of the Misty Mountains. As night fell, he made camp in a small hollow, the wind howling through the nearby crags. In the dead of night, a bone-chilling howl pierced the air. Boromir's eyes snapped open, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword.
By the white tree.
A pack of wargs emerged from the darkness, their yellow eyes gleaming with hunger. Boromir leapt to his feet, blade singing as he drew it from its scabbard.
Come then, foul beasts, taste the steel of Gondor.
The wargs attacked in a frenzy of teeth and claws. Boromir's sword flashed in the moonlight, finding its mark again and again. But for every beast he felled, another seemed to take its place.
Enough of this.
With his free hand, Boromir raised the horn of Gondor to his lips and blew a mighty blast. The sound echoed off the mountainsides, momentarily stunning the wargs. Seizing the advantage, Boromir pressed his attack, driving the creatures back until they finally retreated into the night. Panting heavily, Boromir surveyed the carnage around him. Blood stained his blade and spattered his cloak. As the adrenaline faded, the gravity of the situation settled upon him.
So, this is but a taste of what lies ahead.
He cleaned his sword and tended to his minor wounds, sleep now a distant possibility. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Boromir gathered his belongings and set out once more. The encounter had shaken him, but it also served as a grim reminder of the perils that lay ahead and the imperative nature of his mission.
For Gondor, for all of Middle-earth.
With renewed determination, Boromir pressed on, the long road to Imladris stretching out before him, fraught with dangers yet unknown. Trials and tribulations, the familiar grasslands of Calenardon receded into memory as Boromir, son of Denethor, ventured into the wild, untamed wilderness that lay beyond. The landscape metamorphosed with each league, transforming from rolling hills to dense, primordial forests that seemed to whisper ancient secrets. The air grew thick with the scent of decay and rebirth, a pungent reminder of the land's untamed nature.
By the Valar, what manner of realm is this?
His voice, once resonant with confidence, now carried a hint of awe and trepidation. The path before him twisted and turned, leading him through shadowy glades and over lichen-covered stones that seemed to shift beneath his feet. As the days wore on, the ruins of Tharbad loomed on the horizon, a stark reminder of the impermanence of mortal works. Once a great city, it now stood as a crumbling testament to the ravages of time and war. Boromir approached with caution, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his sword.
So, this is Tharbad, how the mighty have fallen. Now ye have fallen.
His words echoed off the broken stones, stirring dust that had lain undisturbed for centuries. The ruins stretched before him, a maze of toppled columns and shattered archways. At the heart of the desolation lay the Greyflood, its waters swollen and turbulent, a roaring barrier between Boromir and his destination.
I must cross, no matter the peril, for Gondor, for my people.
With grim determination, he urged his steed into the churning waters. The horse whinnied in protest, its eyes wide with fear, but obeyed its master's command. For a moment, it seemed they might succeed, but then disaster struck. A massive surge of water, born of some unseen eddy, crashed over them. Boromir felt himself torn from the saddle, the world becoming a maelstrom of foam and fury. He flailed, fighting against the current that sought to drag him under.
No, not like this.
His fingers grasped at floating debris, finding purchase on a piece of driftwood. With Herculean effort, he pulled himself to the northern bank, gasping and sputtering. As he lay there, drenched and disheartened, the reality of his situation sank in. His horse, his supplies, all swept away by the merciless Greyflood.
All is lost. No, not all. I still draw breath, and while I live, hope remains.
Rising on unsteady legs, Boromir surveyed what little remained of his possessions. His sword, thankfully, still hung at his side, and his horn of Gondor remained secured to his belt. Everything else, food, maps, extra clothing, had been claimed by the river. Undaunted by this setback, Boromir set his jaw and turned his gaze northward. The journey would be harder now, but his resolve had been tempered by adversity. He would continue on foot, relying on his wits and the skills honed through years of rangering. The days that followed tested Boromir in ways he had never imagined. The lush forests that had seemed so inviting now revealed their true nature, a labyrinth of hidden dangers and scarce resources. He foraged for sustenance, learning through trial and error which plants were edible and which harbored poison.
Father would scarcely recognize his son now, grubbing in the dirt like a common vagabond.
A rueful smile played across his lips as he plucked a handful of berries, their tart flavor a poor substitute for the hearty meals of home. Yet each morsel was a triumph, a small victory in his daily battle for survival. The elements, too, seemed to conspire against him. Torrential rains left him shivering, and mud caked, while the unforgiving sun baked the very air he breathed. Through it all, Boromir pressed on, his steps carrying him ever northward through mist-shrouded valleys and over treacherous mountain passes. It was in the labyrinthine trollshaws that Boromir faced his darkest hour. Lost amidst the twisted trees and looming boulders, each path seeming to lead him in circles, he felt the first tendrils of despair take root in his heart.
Have I come so far, only to fail now, to wander these accursed woods until my bones join those of the fallen?
As if in answer to his lament, the trees before him parted, revealing a hidden glade bathed in ethereal light. At its center stood a figure unlike any Boromir had ever encountered. A man, yet not a man, clad in a bright blue jacket and yellow boots that seemed to dance with a life of their own.
Hey Dole, Merry Dole, ring a dong dillo, ring a dong, hop along, foul low the willa, Tom Jolly Tom Bombadil.
The strange figure's song filled the glade, seeming to chase away the shadows that had plagued Boromir's mind. Despite himself, the Gondorian found a smile tugging at his lips.
Foom, what are you?
Who am I? I am as I am. Tom Bombadil is my name, though names matter little in the grand tapestry of things. The question, young Prince of Stone, is who are you? Or rather, who will you become?
Boromir's brow furrowed at the enigmatic words. Before he could formulate a response, Tom continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone.
The path you walk is fraught with peril, not just of body, but of spirit. Beware the whispers of power, for they lead to ruin. Your strength lies not in might of arms, but in the courage to face your own heart.
With those words, Tom Bombadil vanished as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving Boromir alone once more. Yet the glade remained, and with it a renewed sense of purpose. The encounter, brief though it was, had rekindled the flame of hope in Boromir's breast. As he ventured further north, the challenges he faced took on an increasingly supernatural aspect. He came upon a river whose waters shimmered with an unnatural light, its gentle lapping against the shore carrying whispers of forgotten memories.
What sorcery is this?
He knelt to fill his waterskin, only to jerk back as the liquid touched his lips. For a moment, he had forgotten his own name, his mission, everything that defined him. Shaking off the effect with effort, Boromir gave the enchanted river a wide berth, his throat burning with thirst, but his mind clear. The nights brought their own terrors. Massive stone formations loomed in the darkness, their rough-hewn features bearing an uncanny resemblance to trolls frozen in mid-motion. Boromir could have sworn they shifted when his back was turned, inching closer with malevolent intent.
Stand fast, son of Gondor. These are but tricks of shadow and stone.
Yet even as he spoke the words, a chill ran down his spine. The darkness seemed to press in around him, filled with the eerie cries of unseen creatures. Howls that could have been wolf or wraith echoed through the night, testing the limits of his courage. Each trial, each hardship stripped away another layer of Boromir's pride. The confident captain of Gondor, who had set out from Minas Tirith with such certainty, was gradually transformed. In his place stood a man humbled by the vastness of the world, yet strengthened by the adversity he had overcome.
I am not the man I was when I began this journey. For better or worse, I am changed.
As he spoke these words to the uncaring wilderness, Boromir realized the truth of them. The road to Imladris had been long and fraught with danger, but it had forged him anew. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them not just as a warrior of Gondor, but as a man who had looked into the heart of the wild and found himself equal to its tests. Chapter 3: Revelation and Arrival. The austere peaks of the misty mountains loomed before Boromir, their snow-capped summits piercing the heavens like ancient spears. The thin, crisp air bit at his lungs with each labored breath. His once proud stride had dwindled to a weary trudge, each step a battle against the treacherous terrain and his own exhaustion.
By the White Tree, how much farther can this accursed valley be?
The howling wind swallowed his words, lost amidst the desolate crag. Fading memories of ancient maps taunted him, their imprecision mocking his efforts. Instinct alone guided his path now, a primal sense honed by weeks of hardship and survival. Twilight descended, painting the mountainsides in hues of lavender and gold. Shadows lengthened, stretching like grasping fingers across the rocky slopes. Boromir's resolve, tempered by countless trials, began to crack.
Father, forgive me if I sail. Gondor I.
His voice trailed off as he crested yet another ridge. His eyes widened in disbelief. There, nestled in a valley of breathtaking beauty, lay Rivendell. The last homely house east of the sea shimmered in the fading light, its graceful architecture a stark contrast to the wild lands surrounding it.
Elbereth's stars.
The sight stole the very breath from his lungs. Waterfalls cascaded down sheer cliff faces, their mist catching the last rays of sunlight and transforming into shimmering rainbows. Ancient trees swayed in a gentle breeze, their leaves a tapestry of gold and crimson. At the heart of it all stood structures of such ethereal grace that they seemed to have grown from the very earth itself. With renewed vigor, Boromir began his descent into the hidden valley. The path, once treacherous and uncertain, now seemed to welcome his footsteps. As he drew closer to the elven haven, a sense of timelessness enveloped him. The weariness that had seeped into his very bones began to lift, replaced by a profound sense of peace. At the entrance to Rivendell, a group awaited him. At their center stood a figure of such nobility and wisdom that Boromir knew, without a doubt, he was in the presence of Elrond, half-elven.
Welcome, Boromir of Gondor, to Imladris. Long and perilous has been your journey.
Lord Elrond, I am honored. Your hospitality is legendary, and I see now that the tales fall short of the reality.
Elrond's ageless eyes seemed to peer into the very depths of Boromir's soul, weighing and measuring the man before him.
Come, rest and refresh yourself. There is much to discuss, but it can wait until the morrow.
Boromir was led through the winding paths of Rivendell. He marveled at the seamless blend of nature and architecture. Everywhere he looked, beauty abounded. The air itself seemed charged with an ancient power, a reminder of the timeless wisdom of the elves. That night, as he lay upon a bed softer than any he had known in months, sleep eluded Boromir. His mind raced with the implications of his arrival, the weight of his quest pressing upon him, even in this place of tranquility.
What secrets does this place hold? What answers await me?
The questions swirled in his mind, unanswered. As dawn broke, painting the valley in hues of gold and rose, Boromir rose and dressed in fresh garments provided by his hosts. The fabric, finer than anything he had worn in Gondor, whispered against his skin. A soft knock at his door heralded the arrival of an elven attendant who guided him through the winding corridors of the last homely house. The morning air was crisp and invigorating, filled with the scent of blooming flowers and the gentle music of distant waterfalls.
I trust you slept well, son of Denethor.
Elrond's voice, rich with the wisdom of ages, startled Boromir from his reverie. The elf lord stood before him, his ageless face betraying no hint of the burdens he carried.
As well as one can, my lord, when the fate of nations hangs in the balance.
Indeed. Come, walk with me. There is much we must discuss before the council convenes.
As they strolled through the gardens of Rivendell, Elrond spoke of the growing shadow in the east, of the whispers of doom that echoed across the lands.
My lord, the dream that brought me here, seat for the sword that was broken. What can you tell me of this riddle?
Elrond's eyes flickered with an emotion Boromir couldn't quite name. Was it hope, concern? The elf lord's gaze turned towards a secluded glade, where a statue of a woman held aloft a tray. Upon it lay the shards of an ancient blade.
Behold, Boromir, the answer to your riddle. The shards of Narsil, the blade that cut the ring from Sauron's hand. It awaits the time of its reforging.
Boromir's breath caught in his throat as he beheld the legendary weapon. His fingers itched to touch the broken blade, to feel the weight of history it carried. Mwah.
And what of Isildur's Bane, the weapon of the enemy that my dream spoke of?
A shadow passed over Elrond's face, and for a moment he seemed to age before Boromir's eyes.
That, Boromir, is a matter for the council. But know this, the fate of Middle-earth hangs by a thread, and the choices we make in the coming days will shape the future of all free peoples.
As they made their way back to the main hall, Boromir's mind whirled with questions and possibilities. The dream that had driven him across the wilds of Middle-earth was beginning to take shape. Yet with each answer came a host of new uncertainties.
Lord Elrond, I have traveled far and faced many perils to reach this place. My people suffer under the shadow of Mordor. What hope can you offer us?
Hope, Boromir, often comes in forms we least expect. The council will reveal much, but remember, even the smallest person can change the course of the future.
Boromir furrowed his brow, puzzling over Elrond's cryptic words. As they walked, he noticed other figures moving through Rivendell's halls. Tall, graceful elves, stout dwarves with intricately braided beards, and to his surprise, several small figures that could only be halflings.
I had not expected to see such a gathering of the free peoples. What brings them all to Rivendell?
The same shadow that drives your people to desperation, Boromir. Each race, each kingdom, feels the growing threat. We stand at a crossroads of history.
A chill ran down Boromir's spine at Elrond's words. The weight of the moment pressed upon him, heavier than any burden he had carried on his long journey.
And Gondor? What role will the White City play in the coming storm?
That, son of Denethor, may well depend on you. The choices you make here will echo far beyond these hidden valleys.
As they approached the main hall, the sounds of quiet conversation drifted towards them. Boromir straightened his shoulders, acutely aware of his travel-worn appearance among the ethereal beauty of the elves.
Rest now, Boromir. Refresh yourself. Tomorrow, the council will convene, and the true purpose of your journey will be revealed.
With a respectful nod, Boromir took his leave, his mind a-whirl with all he had seen and heard. As he made his way back to his chambers, he passed a group of elves deep in conversation. Their musical voices fell silent as he approached, their ageless eyes regarding him with a mixture of curiosity and concern.
The very air feels charged with anticipation. What great matters will be decided in this hidden valley?
No answer came, save for the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant song of waterfalls. Boromir entered his room, closing the door behind him. He moved to the balcony, gazing out over the breathtaking vista of Rivendell. The last light of day painted the valley in hues of gold and crimson. Boromir's hand unconsciously moved to the hilt of his sword, a gesture of comfort in the face of uncertainty. Tomorrow would bring answers, but also, he sensed, great challenges. As night fell over Rivendell, Boromir of Gondor stood vigil, his heart torn between hope and foreboding, unaware of the pivotal role he would soon play in the fate of all Middle-earth.